The blood under my fingernails wasn't from nightmares. It was from the nights I'd wake up with my fists clenched so tight, dreaming I'd finally unleashed every word Vernon Rollins deserved to hear. Some dreams felt more real than waking life, and some truths cut deeper than any blade ever could. My name is Ruthie Mae Holloway. I'm 78 years old now, sitting on this weathered porch in Russell, Kansas, where the prairie grass whispers secrets to the evening wind. These golden wheat fields have witnessed my darkest moments and greatest triumphs, stretching endlessly toward horizons that once felt impossibly far away. If you're listening to this story, I hope you'll understand why I'm telling it now. The world needs to know what happened behind the factory walls of Heartland Textiles in the 1970s, not just my battle with one cruel man, but the revolution that started with a spiral notebook and nearly cost me everything I'd fought to build. This isn't just about workplace harassment or women's rights. It's about survival, about the dangerous game of power played in America's industrial heartland, where one woman's refusal to break would expose secrets that reached far beyond a single factory floor. January 15th, 1974. The morning that split my life into before and after. I was 27 years old, standing in the personnel office of Heartland Textiles, my hands trembling as Mr. Hargrove slid the promotion paperwork across his scarred wooden desk. The factory around us hummed with the familiar rhythm of progress. Thousands of needles piercing fabric steam, pressing collars, the endless mechanical ballet of industrial production. "Congratulations, Miss Holloway," he said, though his smile never reached his eyes. "First female supervisor in the company's 30-year history." The words should have filled me with pride. Instead, they sent ice through my veins. His tone carried an undertone I couldn't quite identify. Was it warning or threat? "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Hargrove," I replied, signing my name with careful precision. Each letter felt weighted with consequence. "Let me be crystal clear about something." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Corporate in Chicago is pushing this equal opportunity initiative to appease government regulators. The Equal Employment Opportunity Act has everyone nervous about lawsuits and bad publicity." I kept my expression neutral, though my stomach churned. "But this factory runs on results, not politics. One missed quota, one production failure, one hint that this experiment isn't working, and we'll have to reconsider the arrangement. Are we understood?" "Perfectly, sir." What I didn't understand then, couldn't possibly have foreseen, was that my real battle wouldn't be with quotas or production schedules. It would be with a man who'd make it his personal mission to destroy not just my career, but my sanity. That afternoon, I met Vernon Rollins for the first time. He stood 6'2" in the doorway of what would become my office, his cold blue eyes conducting a slow, dismissive assessment from my sensible shoes to my carefully pinned hair. Everything about him radiated the casual arrogance of a man who'd never had his authority questioned. "So you're the girl they're trying to pass off as management?" he said, making no move to shake my extended hand. The deliberate choice of girl instead of woman wasn't lost on me. Neither was the way he positioned himself to block the doorway, forcing me to remain standing like a supplicant in my own office. "Miss Holloway will do fine, Mr. Rollins. I look forward to working together." His laugh was sharp as winter wind. "Let's see how long this little experiment lasts." In that moment, studying his face, I should have recognized the predator's gleam in his eyes. Should have understood that this wasn't about doubting women's capabilities. This was about a man who enjoyed the hunt. "I expect it'll last as long as my performance warrants," I replied, squaring my shoulders. "We'll see about that, Miss Holloway. We'll certainly see." He turned and walked away, but not before I caught his reflection in the office window. He was smiling, not the polite smile of a colleague, but the satisfied expression of someone who'd just spotted easy prey. That night alone in my tiny apartment above Murphy's drugstore, I should have been celebrating. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, noting the worry lines already forming around my eyes. At 27, I looked older than my years, a consequence of 8 years in factory work, of losing my fiancé Jimmy in Vietnam, of fighting for every small victory in a world that seemed determined to keep women in their designated places. My mother's voice echoed in my memory from our last phone call. Success ain't worth your soul, Ruthie Mae. Some fights aren't meant to be won. But Mama had never understood that some fights choose you whether you want them or not. The harassment started subtly, so subtly, that for the first few weeks I questioned my own perceptions. Did Vernon Rollins really exclude me from that production meeting, or had I misunderstood the schedule? Was it truly sabotage when my department's supply orders went missing, or simply administrative oversight? By March, the pattern became undeniable. It was a Tuesday morning when I arrived to find my entire department in chaos. 23 women stood idle around silent sewing machines, their faces tight with anxiety. Martha Jenkins, my most experienced seamstress, approached with a wrinkled piece of paper in her hands. "Miss Ruthie, we got this notice saying our shift was canceled for machine maintenance. But nobody told you." I examined the official-looking memo. Heartland Textiles letterhead, proper formatting, signed by Vernon Rollins. It ordered immediate mechanical inspection of all equipment in Department C, my department, with work suspension until further notice. Did maintenance show up? I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No, ma'am. Been here since 7 and nobody's come through." 23 women, 8 hours of lost production. Nearly $800 in wages that these women, most of them supporting families, desperately needed. I found Rollins in his office, feet propped on his desk, reading the Wichita Eagle, as if he hadn't just sabotaged an entire day's production. "Mr. Rollins, I need to discuss this maintenance order for my department." He glanced up with theatrical surprise. "What about it? No maintenance personnel have arrived? My women are sitting idle." He made a show of checking his watch. "Must be running behind schedule. These things happen." "May I see the work order you submitted to maintenance?" His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Company policy requires all maintenance requests to go through proper channels. I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. He'd issued a bogus cancellation notice without actually scheduling any maintenance. My department would lose a full day's production, making my numbers look bad, while his remained unaffected. "Of course, I'll contact maintenance directly to clarify the situation." "Actually, Holloway, that won't be necessary. I just remembered the inspection was rescheduled for next week. You can send your girls back to work." Next week, when it would disrupt a different production cycle and cost even more money. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a spiral notebook I'd purchased at Woolworth's. The cover was plain green cardboard, nothing special. But as I wrote the date, March 12, 1974, and began documenting every detail of the day's events, I felt something shift inside me. If Vernon Rollins wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules better than he ever had. By summer, the sabotage had escalated beyond missed meetings and mysterious schedule changes. Rollins was testing the boundaries of what he could get away with, each incident more brazen than the last. The July heat wave that year was brutal, temperatures soaring above 100 degrees for 8 consecutive days. The factory's ancient air conditioning system struggled to keep the main floor bearable, but somehow, mysteriously, my department's cooling units began failing one by one. "Maintenance says they're backed up with emergency repairs," Rollins informed me when I approached him about the situation. "Your section isn't considered priority." I walked back to find my women wilting in the stifling heat. Doreen Peterson, barely 20 years old and 5 months pregnant, had gone pale and shaky. Martha Jenkins was fanning her with a piece of cardboard, her own face flushed with concern. "Mr. Rollins says maintenance is backed up," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "But Miss Ruthie," Dorothy Miller spoke up, "the machines in Department A got fixed this morning. Brand new units." Department A, Rollins' personal favorite, supervised by his hand-picked protege, Mike Henderson. That's when I realized this wasn't just harassment. It was something far more dangerous. He was creating working conditions that could seriously harm my employees. Pregnant women working in extreme heat. Elderly seamstresses at risk of heat stroke. The potential for accidents when people were dizzy and disoriented. "Everyone take a 15-minute break," I ordered. "Find the coolest spot you can and drink plenty of water." I marched to the hardware store during my lunch break and spent my own money on 6 electric fans. When I returned, I distributed them throughout my department, running extension cords wherever I could manage. Rollins appeared within an hour. "What's all this?" He gestured at the fans with theatrical confusion. "Emergency cooling measures for safety. Company policy requires approval for all electrical equipment brought onto the factory floor. Then I guess you'd better approve it retroactively since it's already here." His eyes narrowed. "Remove these immediately." No. The word hung in the air between us. Several workers from other departments had stopped to watch our confrontation. "Excuse me." I said, "No, Mr. Rollins. I won't endanger my employees because of a maintenance backlog." "You're insubordinate." "I'm responsible for the safety of 23 workers. If you want to write me up for buying fans with my own money to prevent heat stroke, go ahead." He stared at me for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Filing a complaint about safety equipment would look petty at best, dangerous at worst. Finally, he turned and walked away without another word. But I caught his expression as he left. The predator's gleam had intensified. I'd just escalated from prey to threat, and that made me infinitely more dangerous to him. That night, my third notebook entry was longer than usual. I included details about the temperature readings I'd recorded hourly, the names of witnesses who'd seen other departments receiving prompt maintenance, and photographs I'd taken of the broken cooling units with my small Instamatic camera. I was learning to think like a lawyer, to build cases rather than just document complaints. It was a skill that would soon prove essential. August brought an unlikely ally in the form of Dr. James Morrison, the company physician who conducted monthly health and safety inspections. I'd never spoken to him beyond polite greetings, but that changed the day he found me in the supply closet, silently crying over an incident report. Doreen Peterson had fainted during her shift. The combination of heat, pregnancy, and stress had finally overcome her, and she'd collapsed while operating a heavy-duty sewing machine. Thank God she'd fallen backward instead of forward, or the injury could have been catastrophic. "Miss Holloway?" Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" I quickly wiped my eyes, embarrassed to be caught in a moment of weakness. "Fine, Dr. Morrison. It's been a difficult day." He was a kind-faced man in his 50s with prematurely gray hair and intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Something in his expression suggested he saw more than most people realized. "This is about the Peterson girl, isn't it?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "May I see the incident report?" I handed him the clipboard, watching as he read through my careful documentation of the events leading to Doreen's collapse. "Consistent temperature readings above 95 degrees, he murmured. "Multiple requests for maintenance, cooling system failures." He looked up sharply. "This department's had an unusual number of heat-related incidents this summer. Mr. Rollins says maintenance is backed up." Dr. Morrison's expression hardened slightly. "I inspected the maintenance logs yesterday. Department A received 3 separate cooling system upgrades in the past month. Department B got 2 emergency repairs. Your department has submitted 14 work orders with 0 completed repairs." My heart raced. Here was documentation I couldn't have obtained myself, official maintenance records that proved the systematic neglect of my department. "Dr. Morrison," he held up a hand. "Miss Holloway, I've been conducting industrial health inspections for 20 years. I know the difference between equipment failure and deliberate negligence." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I'm recommending immediate cooling system repairs for Department C, emergency priority. If they're not completed within 48 hours, I'll be filing a safety violation report with the State Labor Board." "You do that." I took an oath to do no harm. That includes preventing harm when I see it being deliberately caused. Dr. Morrison became more than an ally. He became my first real protector. His position gave him access to information and authority that even Rollins couldn't directly challenge. When my department's accident rate mysteriously began climbing due to defective equipment, he demanded maintenance logs. When my workers started reporting unusual levels of respiratory irritation, he tested air quality and found that dust control systems had been mysteriously disconnected. Each discovery went into my notebooks, but now I had professional medical documentation to support my claims. "Why are you helping me?" I asked him one day after he'd intervened in yet another suspicious equipment failure. Because 30 years ago, my wife faced men like Vernon Rollins in her nursing career. He replied quietly. She didn't have anyone to document the truth. She eventually gave up and became a housewife, even though she was the most brilliant medical professional I've ever known. He adjusted his glasses, looking suddenly older. I couldn't help her then, but I can help you now. By October, Vernon Rollins had stopped pretending his actions were anything other than a personal vendetta. The harassment became overt, cruel, and increasingly dangerous. It started with the night shift incident. I'd been scheduled to work late to oversee production of a rush order for a major department store chain. Around 9 p.m., when most of the factory had emptied except for security and cleaning staff, I heard footsteps approaching my office. Rollins appeared in my doorway, clearly having been drinking. His usual cold composure was replaced by something uglier, raw anger fueled by alcohol, and what I was beginning to recognize as genuine hatred. Working late again, Ruthie Mae. He'd never used my first name before, and the familiarity felt like a violation. Just finishing the Dillard's order, Mr. Rollins. Almost done. He stepped into my office, closing the door behind him. My heart began racing as I realized how isolated we were. The nearest occupied office was 3 floors up, and the skeleton night crew was spread throughout the massive building. You know you've caused me a lot of problems this year. I kept my voice steady. I'm not sure what you mean. Don't play stupid. He moved closer to my desk, looming over me. All those complaints to Hargrove, the safety inspections, that damn doctor poking around my operations. I've only reported legitimate concerns. Legitimate concerns. His voice rose dangerously. You've questioned my authority, undermined my decisions, and made me look incompetent in front of senior management. I stood up, putting the desk between us. Mr. Rollins, if you have issues with my performance, I suggest we discuss them during normal business hours. Sit down. I beg your pardon. I said sit down, Ruthie Mae. We're going to have a conversation about your future with this company. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. I remained standing, calculating the distance to the door. He was blocking the most direct route, but if I moved quickly around the other side of the desk, you're not as smart as you think you are. He continued, seeming to enjoy my obvious discomfort. All those little notebooks you keep, all those reports you file, you think you're building some kind of case against me? My blood went cold. How did he know about my notebooks? I kept them locked in my apartment, never brought them to work. I don't know what you're talking about. He smiled, the same predatory expression I'd seen that first day. Mrs. Henderson in the boarding house where you used to live is very chatty. Mentioned how you were always scribbling in little notebooks, writing letters to your parents about work problems. Mrs. Henderson? The landlady who'd made no secret of her disapproval when I'd moved to my own apartment. Who'd always seemed to resent my independence. She also mentioned how you kept those notebooks in an old flour canister. Very security conscious, almost like you were hiding something. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Had he actually been in my apartment, gone through my belongings? That's illegal, I whispered. What's illegal, Ruthie Mae? Having a conversation with a concerned landlady about a former tenant discussing workplace issues with a member of management? He was right, and we both knew it. He'd been careful to stay just within legal boundaries while violating every principle of decency and privacy. Here's what's going to happen. He continued, settling into the chair across from my desk, as if we were having a friendly chat. You're going to request a transfer to another department, something more suitable for your limitations. Filing, maybe, or reception work. I'm not transferring anywhere. Oh, but you are. Because if you don't, I'm going to make your life here so miserable that you'll beg to leave. And Ruthie Mae? He leaned forward conspiratorially. I'm very good at making people miserable. I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the depths of malice I was dealing with. This wasn't just workplace harassment or gender discrimination. This was personal, vindictive, and potentially dangerous. You can't force me to transfer. Can't I? He pulled out a manila folder from his briefcase. Incident report October 3rd. Safety violation unauthorized electrical equipment in work area. October 10th. Insubordination to direct supervisor. October 17th. Failure to follow established maintenance protocols. Each accusation was a distortion of our previous confrontations, documented in his version to make me appear incompetent and difficult. None of that is accurate. It's documented, Ruthie May. Officially filed and witnessed. Keep pushing me and there'll be more reports. Many more. Until your personnel file is so thick with violations that no company in Kansas would touch you. The room seemed to shrink around us. I understood now that I wasn't just fighting for a promotion or workplace equality. I was fighting for my entire future, my ability to support myself, my very survival in a world that offered few alternatives for women like me. Now, he said, standing and straightening his tie as if we'd just concluded normal business. I'll expect your transfer request on my desk by Friday. And Ruthie May, those notebooks of yours, I'd be very careful about what you write in them. Never know who might be reading over your shoulder. He left me alone in my office, shaking with rage and fear in equal measure. That night, I moved my notebooks to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. But the violation of privacy felt like a physical assault. How long had he been watching me? Who else was reporting on my activities? For the first time since receiving my promotion, I seriously considered quitting. I almost didn't go to work the next morning. Sitting in my small apartment, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I looked like a woman on the edge of breakdown. Dark circles under my eyes, weight loss that made my clothes hang loose, hands that trembled when I tried to apply lipstick. Maybe Rollins was right. Maybe this fight wasn't worth the cost. But as I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, something unexpected happened. Instead of defeat, I felt a cold, clear anger settling in my chest. Not the hot rage that makes you do stupid things, but the ice-cold fury that sharpens your mind and strengthens your resolve. Vernon Rollins had made a crucial mistake. He'd revealed the extent of his surveillance, his willingness to violate privacy, his detailed planning to destroy my career. In his arrogance, he'd shown me exactly how dangerous he truly was, and given me the motivation I needed to fight back with everything I had. I called in sick that day and spent the morning at the Wichita Public Library, researching labor law, workplace harassment, and employee rights. What I found was both encouraging and frustrating. While discrimination based on gender was technically illegal, proving it required extensive documentation and witness testimony. The legal system was stacked against individual employees, challenging powerful managers. But I also discovered something else. If I could prove a pattern of harassment that created unsafe working conditions, it became a matter for state labor authorities, not just company human resources. Dr. Morrison had already documented the safety violations. I had months of detailed records showing systematic neglect and sabotage. What I needed now were witnesses willing to speak on the record. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to fight Rollins alone, I would expose the entire pattern of abuse, not just against me, but against every woman in the factory who'd been intimidated into silence. I started with Gladys in accounting. I need to ask you something important, I said when I found her alone in the supply room. And I need you to tell me the truth, even if it's difficult. She looked around nervously. What kind of truth? Has Vernon Rollins ever asked you to alter records, change timesheets, modify production reports, anything like that? Her face went pale. Ruthie, I can't. Gladys, he's trying to destroy my career, and he's using false documentation to do it. If he's asked you to participate, you're not in trouble. But I need to know. She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with her conscience. He had me adjust the break time records for your department, she finally whispered. Made it look like your girls were taking longer breaks than they actually were. Said it was to justify some management decisions. Do you still have the original records? I keep backup copies of everything. Policy requires it. But Ruthie, if he finds out I told you, he won't. But I need you to be prepared to tell the truth if it comes to an official investigation. Investigation? Gladys, what he's doing isn't just wrong, it's illegal. He's falsifying company records, creating unsafe working conditions, and systematically harassing employees. Someone has to stop him. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly approached other employees. Richard from maintenance confirmed that work orders for my department were being deliberately delayed or lost. Helen from personnel admitted that applications for positions in my department were mysteriously disappearing before I could review them. Most damaging of all, I discovered that Rollins had been submitting false production reports to corporate claiming my department was underperforming when the actual numbers showed consistent improvement. Each conversation was dangerous. If word got back to Rollins, everyone who'd spoken to me would face retaliation. But something was happening throughout the factory, a quiet rebellion of people who'd watched the harassment for months and finally found the courage to speak truth to power. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Mike Henderson, Rollins' own protege in Department A. "I can't do this anymore," he said, approaching me after shift change one evening. He looked haggard, older than his 35 years. "Can't do what Mike. He's asked me to lie in reports about your department's performance. Says it's necessary for restructuring decisions. But I know what you've accomplished over there. Your numbers are better than mine." "Why are you telling me this?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "Because I have daughters, Miss Holloway, and someday they might face men like Vernon Rollins. I'd want someone to speak up for them." Mike's testimony was crucial because it came from within Rollins's inner circle. It proved that the sabotage wasn't accidental or policy-driven. It was a deliberate campaign orchestrated by one man's personal vendetta. By early November, I had compiled a comprehensive case file, documented safety violations, falsified records, witness testimonies, and a clear pattern of harassment spanning 8 months. Dr. Morrison had provided medical documentation of health impacts on my workers. The maintenance logs showed systematic discrimination in repairs and upgrades. It was time to take action. November 15th, 1974. The day I walked into Mr. Hargrove's office with a box containing 8 notebooks, dozens of photographs, medical reports, maintenance logs, and signed statements from 12 employees. I'd requested the meeting through official channels, stating only that I needed to discuss systematic operational issues affecting productivity and worker safety. Hargrove's secretary had seemed surprised by the formal language, but scheduled the appointment without question. What I hadn't expected was to find Vernon Rollins already seated across from Hargrove's desk, looking supremely confident. "Miss Holloway," Hargrove began, "Mr. Rollins felt he should be present since your concerns apparently involve his oversight of operations." "Actually, Mr. Hargrove, that makes this simpler." I placed my box on his desk with deliberate care. "My concerns involve Mr. Rollins directly?" Rollins laughed dismissively. "Really, Robert, I told you this would happen. When women can't handle responsibility, they always look for someone else to blame." I opened the box and began removing documents with methodical precision. These are maintenance logs showing that Department C submitted 43 work orders between March and October of this year. Of those, 6 were completed all after Dr. Morrison filed safety violation reports. I placed the logs directly in front of Hargrove, then continued. "These are the corresponding maintenance logs for Departments A and B during the same period. Department A received immediate attention for every request. Department B had an average response time of 3 days. Another stack of papers joined the first. These are production reports submitted by Mr. Rollins to corporate headquarters claiming Department C consistently underperformed quotas. These are the actual production numbers verified by quality control and shipping records. They show Department C exceeded quotas in 7 of the 8 months in question." Rollins shifted uncomfortably, but his voice remained steady. "Production reports are compiled from multiple sources. Discrepancies are normal. These are statements from 12 employees documenting specific instances of harassment safety violations and requests to falsify records." I placed the sworn statements on top of the growing pile. "These are photographs documenting safety hazards that persisted for weeks without correction." Hargrove was examining each document as I presented it, his expression growing increasingly grave. "And these," I concluded, placing my notebooks carefully on his desk, "are contemporaneous records of every incident, conversation, and violation I've witnessed or experienced over the past 8 months. Dates, times, witnesses, exact quotes where applicable. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of machinery from the factory floor. Rollins finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is exactly the kind of vindictive behavior I warned you about, Robert. She's obviously fabricated. These are company documents, Mr. Rollins," I interrupted calmly. "Maintenance logs with official signatures, production reports with your signature, medical reports from Dr. Morrison with State Health Department filing numbers. Nothing here is fabricated." Hargrove looked up from the documents. "Miss Holloway, are you alleging that Mr. Rollins deliberately sabotaged your department's operations?" "I'm presenting evidence of systematic harassment designed to force my resignation and undermine Department C's productivity. The evidence speaks for itself." "Duh! This is insane!" Rollins exploded, jumping to his feet. "You're going to take the word of some disgruntled women over a manager with 15 years of experience?" "I'm going to examine the evidence," Hargrove replied sharply, "and determine what happened in my facility." He turned to me. "Miss Holloway, you mentioned employee statements. Are these people willing to speak directly with management?" "They are, sir. Several have requested to be interviewed separately to avoid any appearance of coordination." That was the moment I saw fear flicker across Rollins' face. He'd counted on the typical reluctance of employees to challenge management, never imagining that his campaign against me had actually galvanized opposition among the workers. "I'll need to investigate these allegations thoroughly," Hargrove continued. "That will include interviews with the employees who provided statements, review of all relevant documentation, and consultation with our legal department." "Legal department?" Rollins seemed genuinely shocked. "Robert, surely that's not necessary." "Mr. Rollins, if these allegations are true, they represent serious violations of company policy and potentially state labor law. Of course, our legal team needs to be involved." Hargrove stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Miss Holloway, I appreciate the thoroughness of your presentation. You'll be hearing from me within the week." As I gathered my empty box and prepared to leave, Rollins caught my arm. "You have no idea what you've started," he hissed quietly. I looked down at his hand gripping my arm, then met his eyes directly. "Actually, Mr. Rollins, I know exactly what I've started. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next." The next 5 days were the longest of my professional life. Rollins was conspicuously absent from the factory floor, supposedly attending meetings at corporate headquarters. Rumors flew through the building like wildfire, everything from my immediate termination to Rollins' transfer to speculation about federal investigators. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the gossip suggested. Mr. Hargrove had moved quickly, assembling an internal investigation team that included the plant's legal counsel, a senior manager from the Chicago office, and Dr. Morrison as an expert witness on the safety violations. One by one, they interviewed the employees who'd provided statements. Gladys told me later that the questioning was thorough, but professional. They'd asked for specific details about each incident she'd witnessed, requested copies of the backup records she'd maintained, and assured her that retaliation against witnesses would result in immediate termination of the offending party. "They were more interested in facts than feelings," she reported. "Wanted dates, times, exact procedures. Made it clear this was serious business." Mike Henderson's interview had been particularly crucial. As a supervisor himself, his testimony carried weight that couldn't be dismissed as the complaints of disgruntled subordinates. He'd provided detailed information about Rollins' instructions to submit false reports, his deliberate undermining of my authority, and his openly stated intention to force my resignation. The medical evidence was perhaps most damaging. Dr. Morrison had documented not just the safety violations, but the health impacts on my workers. Heat exhaustion, respiratory problems, stress-related symptoms, all directly traceable to the unsafe conditions that had persisted in my department, while other areas received immediate attention. On Friday afternoon, Mr. Hargrove called me to his office. "Sit down, Miss Holloway." His tone was unreadable, but I noticed my box of evidence still sitting on his credenza, now accompanied by several additional files. "I've completed the initial investigation into your allegations." He began removing his glasses to clean them, a gesture I'd learned indicated serious discomfort. "The findings are disturbing." I remained silent, waiting. The documentary evidence supports your claims regarding maintenance delays, falsified production reports, and systematic denial of resources to your department. Several employees have confirmed witnessing harassment and unprofessional conduct. He replaced his glasses and met my eyes directly. Most seriously, we've discovered that Mr. Rollins has been submitting false reports to corporate headquarters, claiming performance failures in your department that our own records don't support. That's not harassment, Miss Holloway, that's fraud. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by apprehension. What happens now? Mr. Rollins has been terminated effective immediately. He's been escorted from the premises and informed that he's prohibited from returning to company property. Terminated. Not transferred, not reprimanded, fired. I want to be clear about something. Hargrove continued. This investigation revealed serious failures in our management oversight. We should have recognized what was happening months ago. The company bears responsibility for allowing this situation to continue as long as it did. I appreciate that, sir. There's more. Corporate has reviewed your department's actual performance data, not the falsified reports Mr. Rollins submitted. Your productivity numbers are among the best in the company. Your safety record when equipment is properly maintained is exemplary. Your workers consistently rate their job satisfaction higher than other departments. He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. The Chicago office has authorized me to offer you a promotion, assistant production manager with oversight of multiple departments and direct reporting to me rather than department-level management. A promotion. After everything I'd endured, they were offering me advancement instead of just vindication. The position comes with a significant salary increase and an office on the management floor. He continued. It also comes with a challenge. You'd be supervising managers who've never reported to a woman before. Some of them won't take kindly to the change. I thought about everything I'd sacrificed to reach this point. The sleepless nights, the stress-related health problems, the constant fear of retaliation. Then I thought about the women in my department who'd supported me, the employees who'd risked their jobs to tell the truth, and all the future Ruthie Mae Holloways who might face their own Vernon Rollins. I'd be honored to accept the position, Mr. Hargrove. Good. He stood and extended his hand for the first time since I'd started working at Heartland. Welcome to senior management, Miss Holloway. Vernon Rollins didn't go quietly. Within a week of his termination, he'd filed complaints with the State Labor Board, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the Better Business Bureau, claiming that Heartland Textiles had discriminated against him in favor of unqualified female employees. He alleged reverse discrimination corporate conspiracy and even hinted at improper relationships between female employees and male supervisors. The complaints were investigated and dismissed, but not before causing significant stress and legal expense for the company. More troubling were the rumors he began spreading throughout Wichita's tight-knit industrial community, claims that I'd advanced through sexual favors, that the harassment allegations were fabricated, that Heartland was now dominated by radical feminists who discriminated against male employees. Some of it stuck. I encountered skeptical looks at industry meetings, whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, vendors who seemed surprised that a woman was making purchasing decisions for a major textile manufacturer. But something unexpected happened as well. Women from other companies began reaching out to me, sharing their own stories of harassment and discrimination. I started receiving letters from female employees at factories throughout Kansas, describing situations that mirrored my own experience with Rollins. Your story gives me hope, wrote Maria Santos, a supervisor at a food processing plant in Salina. I've been documenting incidents for months, but I was afraid to come forward. Knowing that someone won and that justice is possible makes me feel less alone. Similar letters arrived weekly. Women who'd been sabotaged, undermined, harassed, or threatened. Women who'd kept their own notebooks, gathered their own evidence, but lacked the courage or support system to fight back. I began responding to every letter offering advice about documentation, legal resources, and strategies for building internal support. Without realizing it, I'd become part of an informal network of women challenging workplace discrimination throughout the Midwest. My new position at Heartland came with its own challenges. but they were different from the systematic harassment I'd endured under Rollins. The male managers who now reported to me ranged from cautiously respectful to openly skeptical, but none attempted the kind of deliberate sabotage that had characterized my previous experience. Some, like Frank Morrison, no relation to Dr. Morrison, the shipping department supervisor, made their disapproval clear through subtle insubordination, missed meetings, delayed reports, decisions made without consultation. But when I addressed these issues directly citing specific company policies and performance expectations, the behavior typically improved. Others, surprisingly, became genuine allies. Tom Bradley, the quality control manager, had initially been among the most skeptical about my promotion. But after 6 months of working together, he became one of my strongest supporters. "I have to admit, I didn't think this would work," he told me during a quarterly review meeting. "Nothing personal, I just couldn't see how a woman could handle men who'd been in this business for decades. And now I see that good management is about understanding the work and the people, not about matching some traditional image. You know this operation better than anyone, and you've got ideas that are actually improving our processes." That was true. My years on the factory floor had given me insights into production bottlenecks and workflow problems that managers who'd never operated the equipment couldn't see. Simple changes, adjusting brake schedules to match natural energy cycles, reorganizing supply storage to reduce walking time, creating cross-training programs to handle absences, had improved productivity across all departments. More importantly, my experience with documentation and systematic problem-solving had transformed how we approached operational challenges. Instead of relying on assumptions or tradition, we began collecting data, measuring results, and making evidence-based decisions. The culture began to shift in other ways as well. When Sarah Peterson, Doreen's sister-in-law, applied for a supervisor position in the cutting department, her qualifications were evaluated fairly rather than dismissed due to her gender. When equipment failed, work orders were processed based on safety and production priorities rather than favoritism or politics. By the end of 1975, women held 4 of the 12 supervisory positions at Heartland, not through any quota system or corporate mandate, but because they'd proven their competence and been given fair consideration for advancement. 2 years after Rollins's termination, I thought the chapter was finally closed. My position was secure, the factory was running more efficiently than ever, and I'd helped establish policies that would protect future employees from harassment and discrimination. Then in March of 1977, I received a phone call that changed everything I thought I knew about Vernon Rollins and his campaign against me. "Miss Holloway, this is Jennifer Rollins, Vernon's daughter." I nearly dropped the phone. After a moment of shocked silence, I managed to respond. How can I help you? I need to talk to you about my father and what happened at Heartland. There are things you don't know, things that make what he did even worse than you realize." We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop outside Wichita, far from the factory or anywhere we might be recognized. Jennifer was a young woman in her early 20s, with her father's sharp features but kind eyes that held no trace of his cold cruelty. "I want to apologize for what he put you through," she began without preamble. "And I want you to know that you weren't his only victim." "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, clearly struggling with painful memories. "My father has a pattern. At every job he's ever held, he finds a woman to target, usually someone competent and ambitious, who threatens his sense of superiority. He systematically destroys them, then moves on to the next company, the next victim." I stared at her, processing the implications. "How many?" "That I know of, at least 6, maybe more. He keeps trophies." "Trophies?" Jennifer reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook disturbingly similar to the ones I'd used to document my own experience. "He kept detailed records of his campaigns, strategies for harassment, psychological manipulation techniques, ways to create the appearance of incompetence while avoiding legal liability. He studied it like a science." I opened the notebook with trembling hands. Page after page of cold, calculated notes about how to destroy women's careers. Lists of pressure points, vulnerability assessments, timelines for escalation. "There's more," Jennifer continued. He didn't work alone. There's a network of men in management positions throughout the Midwest who share information, coordinate blacklisting, and help each other target women who challenge the established order. The blood drained from my face. A network? They call themselves the Old Boys Club, but it's more than just informal support. They actively work to keep women out of management positions, sharing names of troublemakers and ensuring they can't find work elsewhere. She showed me another notebook, this one containing names, companies, and detailed profiles of women who'd been targeted across multiple industries. Your name is in here, Miss Holloway. They were tracking your career even before my father was assigned to Heartland. The harassment campaign wasn't random. It was planned from the beginning. I felt sick. Everything I'd endured, everything I'd fought against, was part of a larger conspiracy designed to keep women out of positions of power and authority. Why are you telling me this? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Because I've watched him destroy good people my entire life, and I can't stay silent anymore. And because... She hesitated, then continued with visible effort. Because he's still doing it, at his new job in Colorado. There's another woman, another target, and she doesn't have your strength or your documentation skills. What do you want me to do? Help me stop him. Help me expose the whole network before they destroy more careers, more lives. I looked at the notebook she'd shown me, thinking about all the women who'd written to me over the past 2 years, sharing their own stories of harassment and discrimination. How many of them had faced men connected to this network? How many battles had been lost because the victims thought they were fighting alone? What would that involve? Going public, media attention, legal action, exposure of the network and its methods. It won't be easy. These men have power and resources. But with the evidence I have and your credibility as someone who fought back successfully, I thought about my comfortable position at Heartland, the security I'd finally achieved, the peaceful life I'd built. Exposing this network would mean giving up that safety, making myself a target, again facing retaliation from powerful men across multiple industries. But I also thought about Maria Santos and all the other women who'd written to me seeking hope and courage to fight their own battles. I thought about the young women entering the workforce, unaware that systematic campaigns existed to prevent their advancement. Yes, I said finally, let's stop him. What Jennifer Rollins revealed to me that day in the coffee shop was just the beginning. Over the following months, as we worked together to document the network she'd described, we uncovered a conspiracy that reached far beyond anything I'd imagined. The Old Boys Club was indeed more than informal networking. It was a coordinated effort involving dozens of men in management positions across the industrial Midwest, systematically working to prevent women from advancing into leadership roles. They maintained detailed files on women they considered threats, anyone who showed leadership potential, challenged male authority, or advocated for other women. These files were shared between companies, ensuring that targeted women found it difficult to advance no matter where they worked. The methods were sophisticated and varied. Some faced harassment campaigns like mine with Vernon Rollins. Others encountered mysterious performance issues, fabricated complaints, or sudden budget cuts that eliminated their positions. The most troubling cases involved character assassination rumors about personal conduct, professional competence, or mental stability that followed women throughout their careers. They've perfected the art of destroying reputations while maintaining plausible deniability, Jennifer explained during one of our research sessions. Each incident looks like bad luck or personality conflicts, but the pattern only becomes clear when you see the bigger picture. We began reaching out to women whose names appeared in the network's files, carefully explaining what we'd discovered and asking them to share their experiences. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of women came forward with stories that fit the same patterns Jennifer had identified. Carol Martinez, an accountant in Kansas City, had been systematically excluded from important meetings and client interactions until her performance reviews became so poor she was forced to accept a demotion. Linda Thompson, a quality control manager in Omaha, had faced a barrage of safety complaints about her department that investigation later revealed were entirely fabricated. Patricia Williams, a production supervisor in St. Louis, had been subjected to rumors about her personal life that destroyed her marriage and ultimately forced her resignation. Each case followed the same methodology documented in the network's files: identify the target, isolate her from allies, create performance or personal problems, then maintain pressure until she either quit or could be legitimately terminated. Dr. Morrison proved invaluable in this expanded investigation. His medical background gave him credibility with reporters and legal experts, while his position in industrial health allowed him to verify safety-related claims and violations. "This isn't just employment discrimination," he told me after reviewing the evidence we'd compiled. "This is organized criminal conspiracy. What they're doing violates federal civil rights laws, labor regulations, and possibly RICO statutes." By autumn of 1977, we had documented over 40 cases of systematic harassment connected to the network. Jennifer had provided not just her father's notebooks, but financial records showing payments between network members, correspondence detailing strategy sessions, and meeting minutes that explicitly discussed methods for managing the woman problem in their industries. The evidence was overwhelming, but presenting it publicly would require careful strategy. These were powerful men with significant resources and legal teams. Any premature revelation could result in destroyed evidence, intimidated witnesses, or successful defamation lawsuits against us. We needed media allies, legal support, and political protection before we could safely go public. The break we needed came from an unexpected source, Susan Walsh, an investigative reporter for the Kansas City Star, who'd been researching workplace discrimination in American manufacturing. "I've been hearing rumors about something like this for months," she told me during our first meeting. "Women across the region reporting similar experiences, but no one could see the connecting patterns." Susan had the resources and expertise to investigate the network properly. More importantly, she had editors willing to support a major exposé that would likely generate significant legal and political pushback. This could be the biggest workplace discrimination story since the early civil rights investigations, she said after reviewing our evidence. "But we need to be absolutely certain of every fact. These men will challenge everything we publish." The investigation took 6 months. Susan and her team verified every document, interviewed dozens of witnesses, and consulted with legal experts specializing in employment law and organized crime. They traced financial connections between network members, documented the movement of personnel between companies, and established clear patterns of coordinated harassment across multiple states. Meanwhile, I continued working at Heartland, maintaining my normal responsibilities, while secretly preparing for the media storm I knew was coming. Mr. Hargrove remained unaware of the investigation, though I planned to brief him privately before publication to minimize impact on the company. The legal implications were complex. Federal prosecutors expressed interest in potential criminal charges related to civil rights violations and conspiracy, but warned that building a case would take years and success wasn't guaranteed. Civil lawsuits were more promising. Several affected women had grounds for significant damages, claims against both individual network members and their employers. Most importantly, we'd identified current ongoing campaigns, including the Colorado situation Jennifer had mentioned involving her father. Armed with detailed evidence about network methods and active targets, we could potentially intervene to protect women who were currently under attack. The story broke on Sunday, March 12, 1978, with a front-page headline in the Kansas City Star: "Secret Network Systematically Harassed Working Women Across Midwest." The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, other newspapers picked up the story. Television news crews arrived in Wichita, Kansas City, and other cities mentioned in the report. Network members found themselves confronted by reporters asking about specific allegations documented in their own internal communications. Some denied everything. Others claimed their activities were simply informal networking among professional colleagues. A few attempted to discredit the investigation by attacking the motives and credibility of the women involved. Vernon Rollins, reached at his Colorado workplace, issued a statement through his attorney claiming the allegations were fabricated by vindictive former employees seeking financial gain through litigation. But the evidence was too extensive and well documented for blanket denials to be effective. Within a week, 3 network members had been suspended from their positions pending internal investigations. Two companies announced policy changes designed to prevent coordination between competitors on personnel matters. The Colorado woman Jennifer had mentioned Lisa Chen, an engineering supervisor, contacted me directly after seeing the news coverage. "I thought I was going crazy," she said during our phone conversation. "Everything you described in the article has been happening to me for months. But knowing it's systematic, that there are specific techniques being used, that changes everything." With advance warning about the network's methods and specific information about her situation, Lisa was able to build her own documentation case and eventually expose the harassment campaign before it could destroy her career. Similar outcomes occurred across the region as other targeted women recognized the patterns described in the media coverage and took action to protect themselves. The legal aftermath was swift and severe. Within 6 months of the story's publication, federal prosecutors had filed charges against 12 network members under civil rights conspiracy statutes. The evidence Jennifer had provided, combined with the additional documentation uncovered during the media investigation, supported criminal charges for violating women's civil rights through coordinated harassment campaigns. Vernon Rollins was among those indicted. The Colorado case against him was particularly strong because Lisa Chen had documented his activities in real time, creating the kind of contemporaneous evidence that prosecutors love. His trial began in the spring of 1979. I testified for 3 days, describing my experience at Heartland and presenting the evidence I'd compiled. Jennifer testified about her father's methods and the materials she'd discovered. Dr. Morrison provided expert testimony about the health impacts of systematic workplace harassment. The defense strategy was predictable claim that the harassment was individual misconduct by a few bad actors, not an organized conspiracy. Argue that women's difficulties advancing in male-dominated industries reflected natural market forces rather than artificial discrimination. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury saw Vernon Rollins' own notebooks detailing his harassment strategies. They heard recordings of network meetings where members discussed specific techniques for undermining female employees. They reviewed financial records showing payments for consulting services that were actually coordination fees. The verdict was unanimous guilty on all counts. Vernon Rollins was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. Other network members received similar sentences, though most negotiated plea agreements to avoid trial. The civil lawsuits were even more successful. Juries awarded significant damages to women who'd lost jobs, been denied promotions, or suffered health problems due to network harassment. Several companies settled large class action suits rather than face public trials that would expose their complicity in the conspiracy. But the most important victory was cultural. The media coverage had revealed systematic discrimination that many people had either ignored or dismissed as individual complaints. The criminal convictions established legal precedents that made similar future conspiracies far more risky. Women throughout the region began documenting their workplace experiences more systematically, building the kind of evidence files that had proven crucial in exposing the network. Companies implemented new policies and training programs designed to prevent harassment and ensure fair advancement opportunities. The spiral notebooks I'd started keeping in my flour canister had become the foundation for a transformation that reached far beyond Heartland textiles. By 1980, the industrial landscape in the Midwest had changed dramatically. The exposure of the network had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond the original conspirators. Companies throughout the region had implemented new policies governing hiring, promotion, and workplace conduct. Training programs addressing discrimination and harassment became standard practice. More importantly, women entering management positions found a support system that hadn't existed before. The informal networks that had once excluded them were gradually becoming more inclusive, while new organizations specifically supporting female managers provided resources and advocacy. At Heartland Textiles, the transformation was particularly dramatic. By 1981, women held 8 of the 15 management positions, including 2 at the senior level. The company's performance had improved significantly. Productivity was up, turnover was down, and worker satisfaction scores were the highest in the industry. I'd been promoted again, this time to plant operations director, making me the highest-ranking woman in Heartland's corporate history. The position came with oversight of multiple facilities and influence over company-wide policies affecting thousands of employees. "You know," Mr. Hargrove said during his retirement party, "when I hired you as a supervisor back in '74, I thought we were conducting an experiment. Turns out we were starting a revolution." He wasn't wrong. The changes at Heartland had influenced other companies throughout the region. Our success in integrating women into management positions had proven that diversity wasn't just morally right, it was profitable. But success brought new challenges. With greater visibility came greater scrutiny. Every decision I made was analyzed for evidence of favoritism toward women. Every policy change was questioned as potentially discriminatory against men. The pressure to be perfect was enormous. I also found myself becoming a reluctant spokesperson for working women throughout the region. Speaking requests arrived: weekly conferences, college campuses, professional organizations, all wanting to hear about the fight against the network and the lessons learned from the experience. Initially, I tried to decline most invitations. I was a factory manager, not a public speaker or women's rights advocate. But gradually, I came to understand that visibility was part of the responsibility that came with my position. "You're not just representing yourself anymore," Dr. Morrison observed during one of our occasional lunch meetings. "You're proof that the changes we fought for actually work. Other women need to see that success is possible." He was right, of course. The letters I continued receiving from women across the country made it clear that my story provided hope and practical guidance for their own career struggles. But the most satisfying part of my new role was mentoring the next generation of female managers. Women like Sarah Peterson, who'd become supervisor of the cutting department, and Maria Gonzalez, who'd been promoted from the factory floor to head quality control. "The thing I'm most grateful for," Sarah told me during a quarterly review, "is that I don't have to fight the battles you fought. The policies are in place, the precedents are set. I can focus on doing my job well instead of constantly proving I deserve to have it." That was exactly what we'd hoped to achieve. Not just individual success stories, but systemic changes that would benefit future generations of working women. As I write this in 1995, 21 years after that first promotion to supervisor, I'm preparing for retirement from Heartland Textiles. The company that once grudgingly tolerated one female manager now routinely promotes women to leadership positions based on merit rather than gender. The changes extend far beyond personnel policies. The management techniques I learned through necessity, systematic documentation, evidence-based decision-making, collaborative problem-solving have become standard practice throughout the organization. The crisis management skills developed during my battle with Vernon Rollins proved invaluable in navigating the business challenges of the 1980s and early 1990s. Most importantly, the culture of the workplace has fundamentally shifted. Sexual harassment and gender discrimination haven't been eliminated entirely, but they're no longer tolerated or ignored. Clear policies exist, reporting mechanisms are in place, and swift action is taken when violations occur. The network that once systematically undermined women's careers has been permanently dismantled. Several of its former members never worked in management again after their criminal convictions. Others found that their reputations in the business community made advancement impossible. Vernon Rollins served his prison sentence and attempted to rebuild his career, but the notoriety from the trial made him unemployable in any major corporation. He eventually moved to another state and took a low-level position with a small company, his ambitions permanently crushed by the exposure of his activities. Jennifer Rollins became a successful civil rights attorney specializing in workplace discrimination cases. She credits our collaboration in exposing the network with inspiring her career choice. Seeing justice achieved in my father's case showed me that legal systems can work when people have courage to challenge them. She told me at a recent conference where we both spoke about organizational change. Dr. Morrison retired from Heartland in 1988, but continued consulting on industrial health and safety issues until his death in 1993. His willingness to support my case when few others would take the risk was crucial to everything that followed. The spiral notebooks that started this journey remain in my possession, carefully preserved as historical documents. Researchers studying workplace discrimination in the 1970s have found them valuable primary sources for understanding both the challenges women faced and the strategies that proved effective in overcoming them. But their most important function was never historical, it was practical. The discipline of systematic documentation, the habit of recording incidents and preserving evidence, became a methodology that countless other women adopted in their own career struggles. I receive letters regularly from women who've used similar techniques to expose harassment build cases for promotion or simply maintain professional credibility in difficult situations. Each success story validates the approach we developed through necessity all those years ago. Retirement from Heartland doesn't mean retirement from the cause that shaped the second half of my career. I continue consulting with companies on diversity and inclusion issues, speaking at conferences, and mentoring young women entering management positions. The challenges have evolved, but they haven't disappeared. Glass ceilings still exist, though they're often more subtle than the overt harassment I faced. Wage gaps persist despite equal pay legislation. Work-life balance remains a struggle for women more than men, but the tools for addressing these challenges are more sophisticated now. Legal protections are stronger. Support networks are more extensive. Documentation and evidence-gathering techniques are more advanced. Most importantly, women entering the workforce today don't have to fight alone. The isolation that made Vernon Rollins' campaign so effective, the sense that I was the only one facing such systematic undermining, rarely exists now. Social media, professional organizations, and formal mentoring programs connect women across industries and geographic boundaries. What we discovered through painful experience, that harassment campaigns often follow predictable patterns, that documentation is crucial, that allies can be found in unexpected places, is now common knowledge. The notebooks I kept in a flower canister have been replaced by digital records, audio recordings, and photographic evidence that can be instantly shared and preserved. The legal landscape has evolved to provide better protection for whistleblowers and stronger penalties for workplace discrimination. But the fundamental principle remains unchanged: systematic problems require systematic responses. Individual courage must be supported by collective action. Evidence and documentation remain more powerful than emotion or rhetoric. To the women watching this video or reading this story, your struggles matter. Your documentation matters. Your willingness to stand up against unfairness makes a difference, not just for you, but for every woman who comes after you. Keep your own notebooks, whether they're digital or handwritten. Build your cases carefully and thoroughly. Find your allies wherever you can. And remember that every small victory contributes to larger transformations that benefit us all. The wheat fields outside this Kansas porch will outlast all of us, as they've outlasted previous generations of farmers and factory workers, dreamers and fighters. But while we're here, we have the opportunity and responsibility to make things better for those who follow. That's the real legacy of the notebooks, not just one woman's survival of workplace harassment, but a methodology for change that has spread far beyond the factory walls where it originated. The fight continues, but it's no longer fought alone, and that makes all the difference.